Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Angie, and in this video I'll show you how I made some vintage inspired Halloween decor. For the first project, I'm using scrap wood and some storage boxes that I bought at Target a few years ago. I laid the boxes out in the configuration that I wanted so I could get a measurement to cut the wood. I cut the top, bottom, and side pieces and then cut the piece that will go between the stacked boxes. It's just easier for me to lay it all out and then determine the cuts than it is to add up all the measurements. Once I had all the cuts made, I marked where the center support was going to be attached. I then took the boards that are going to be between the drawers and made pocket holes on each end. Next, I attached the boards to the center support using glue and screws. When I had both boards attached to the center support, I then attached it to the side pieces. Next, I attached it to the bottom board using glue and nails. I then flipped it over and attached the top board the same way. I used a piece of MDF beadboard to cover the back. I just nailed it in place and then sanded all the edges. I didn't have any small feet, so I just glued a few small wood rounds together to use as the feet. I then painted everything but the top black, including the drawers. I used leftover stain on the wood top, and when that was dry, I gave it 2 coats of a clear sealer. I then put gold rub and buff on the drawer pulls. To finish it, I applied antiquing wax over the paint and attached the drawer pulls. For this project, I'm starting by gluing a small styrofoam ball to a larger one. I then made a flat spot on the bottom of the larger styrofoam ball. While the glue was drying, I cut a skinny dowel into small sections. I'll use this for the arms and legs. I used 2 1-inch pieces for the arms and a 1-inch and a 1 3/4 inch piece for the legs. I then went ahead and painted the ends of each dowel piece. When the paint was dry, I inserted the dowel into a striped paper straw. This was a snug fit, so I didn't bother adding any glue. Next, I added a small eye hook to the end of each piece of dowel. I then used a jump ring to attach the sections together. I then used a ball of air dry clay to make the shoes and hands. I put an eye hook on the bottom of the arms and legs so the clay would have something to attach to. I also used a little glue as well. Next, I rolled out some air dry clay and covered the larger styrofoam ball. I added glue under the clay on this one because I'm using a smooth styrofoam ball and the clay doesn't stick as easily as the rough ones. I'm just using water to smooth the clay out. I then covered the head. No glue is needed on this one since the ball has a rough texture already. Next, I sculpted the cheeks and mouth using clay tools and water to smooth it out. To make the nose, I cut a piece of an eraser into a triangle shape and pressed that into the clay. I then let it dry overnight. When the clay was dry, I used an X-Acto knife on the shoes and hands to give it a textured look. I then painted the hands, shoes, and head. Next, I drew a line around the top half of the larger ball. I then painted the upper half, leaving the lower half unpainted. I then painted the face. To make the eyes, I cut the shape I wanted them to be out of paper and then traced around it onto the face. I used a paint pen to add the details on the face and shirt. I used a piece of scrap felt to make a witch's hat. I also glued a piece of wire inside the hat so I could scrunch it. To cover the bottom half, I decoupaged a piece of tissue paper on it. To attach the arms and legs, I glued an eye pin into the styrofoam. Next, I covered the entire thing with antiquing wax. I then glued some yarn above the shoes and some scrap tulle above the hands. Next, I glued a small piece of trim to the front of his shirt and then glued a small fringe to the top of his pants. I also used hemp cord to make a small bow and glued these to the tops of the shoes. To attach the arms and legs, I used a small jump ring and attached it to the eye pins. Next, I glued a small tulle ruffle around the neck. I used a piece of a paper cupcake liner to make the bow tie and then glued that into place. I then glued the hat on. I used liquid pearl paint to make the buttons. To finish it, I drilled some small holes into a miniature resin cap bucket and then added a piece of paper-covered wire to one side. I then drilled a hole through the hand and inserted the wire and then attached it to the other side of the bucket. For this project, I'm using an empty ribbon spool and a paper mache box. I started by trimming the edge flush with the center. Next, I glued on a piece of cardstock to cover the hole in the center and to make it more sturdy. I then glued on a piece of craft paper, cutting it slightly bigger than the spool. I clipped the edges and glued it in place to cover the cut edges. Next, I painted it orange and then remembered I wanted it black, so I repainted it. I also painted the paper mache box, which I forgot to film. While the boxes were drying, I painted the wood dowels. I glued on a strip of scrapbook paper to cover the side of the ribbon spool and then glued a cat image to the front. I then inked all the edges of the box. I used a paint pen to decorate the sides of the paper mache box and glued a pumpkin image to the lid as well as inking the edges. I also used a paint pen to decorate the dowels. I printed out some Halloween text and then glued them to the back of the boxes. Next, I used some baker's twine and tied a rusty bell to the end. I then drilled a hole in the bottom of the spool and glued the dowel in. To attach the bells, I drilled a small hole on each side and then glued the twine in the hole. The paper mache box is easier since you can leave the lid off to glue the dowel and bells on. Once I had the dowels and bells attached, I glued the lid on. I then glued twine and ribbon onto the top of the dowel. For this one, I glued some black tinsel around the edge. I used tulle trim to make a ruffle for the pumpkin one and glued it into place. I decided to make a third one, but make it a different style, so I started by painting a thin wood round. I then glued a piece of cardstock to the back. Next, I cut out a cat image and glued that to the front of the wood round. I'm using a plastic ornament disc, so I first removed the hanger. I then added a little glitter to the center and glued the dome onto the wood round. I wish I would have had some Halloween confetti instead of the glitter to use. For the stick on this one, I covered the wood dowel with a paper straw. Next, I glued some orange tinsel around the edge and then added a little orange glitter glue. When that was dry, I attached the dowel onto the back. I then covered the stick with clay and added a small bead to cover the hole. When the clay was dry, I painted it black. I then used Rub and Buff to highlight the clay. To finish it, I added twine and some bells to the top of the dowel. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed these Halloween projects, and I'll see you in the next video.